Hello and welcome back to the CineSkinny, the podcast from the people behind the Skinny magazine. Now, you may notice this is not Peter Simpson. Peter is back from holiday, so he's sent out this week, so you're stuck with me, Jimmy Dunn, as host, but I am joined, as ever, by Anahit Bruce. Hello, Anahit. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well.
Great.
And Ellie Robertson.
Hello.
So, yeah, and we also have a kind of total change of format this week as well, because we looked at the film release schedule and realised there was literally nothing we wanted to talk about. What's going on? There's no good movies in June.
No good movies.
So weird.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd try something a bit different. We're going to have a call-in show. So unfortunately we don't have a hotline. We're not live, but we have
We should do that one time though.
We should do it live. That'd be terrifying. Can you imagine?
Let's see how this
great.
goes first.
Just randos phoning in, like heavy breathing down the phone.
Let's go.
Terrifying. But we did ask some friends of the pod and some listeners to send in some questions, and they did. And by God, we're going to try and answer them. Well, answer as many as we can, but by the time my stopwatch says an hour.
Jamie set a timer. Jamie does not want to do this for a second longer than he has to.
Is everyone up for it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are we pumped?
Yeah.
Are we psyched?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Because we have so many questions, we're actually going to forgo our usual what we've been watching and go straight into the questions, as I say, which come from all sorts of people. But the first one comes from a listener called, check notes, Peter Simpson. So Peter, what do you want to ask us?
Greetings, comrades. It's your old friend Peter, and I've got some good news for you. Big Cinema is adapting the CineSkinny into a major motion picture, but I need to know who would play each of you in this flick. Jamie, I need you to cast Anahit. Anahit, you pick who would be Ellie, and Ellie, you choose Jamie. Cat amongst pigeons, can of worms, open. I'll be back very soon. I would say I'm still in France on holiday, but I'm actually just in a meeting room shit-stirring for no reason. Anyway, cool. Bye.
He's very sneakily done an episode where he does not have to partake in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think
and he's kind of thrown a live grenade into the studio.
Yeah. I've been like, this is not my business.
I know, this is like a terrible way to start.
Maybe we should all also cast Peter.
Yes, that is a great idea. So get thinking on that.
Like a bearded man. Excuse me.
Bearded man, is that bearded white man who comes up?
Actually, yeah, let's see.
Who's the most offensive? There's that time JD Vance had a beard. That was kind of weird.
We should absolutely cast JD Vance as Peter
Major
Simpson.
motion picture actor JD Vance.
So right.
Well, shall I go first then? Because I'm the first on the line. Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, I found this really tricky actually. Because I was trying to think of someone who I always think of you, Annie, as very, very chic, very cool.
Really?
Very charming, very funny.
Oh my God.
and great hair was the key thing.
Yeah,
as well.
that is true.
So I was thinking, like, you know, this might be too obvious, and I'm sure, has anyone brought this up before? Sharon Moonstruck. The Cher hair.
No, but they should. They should do that
But then
more.
you don't have, I don't know, you don't really have quite the Cher vibe, but like a little bit. Like there's a little bit of kind of biker chick kind of coolness about you. But I didn't. I thought of Cher. I thought of Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
My brother says I look like her a lot in, what is it? No, not Frasier. Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, yeah. Back when she was younger, yeah. I could see like a young Julia Dreyfus could be great. I also wrote down Raquel Welch. No, not Raquel Welch.
Rachel Weisz.
Rachel Weisz.
Rachel Weisz.
Why did I say Rachel's? Rachel Weisz.
Oh,
I don't know.
that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
I don't know. You seem to have similar vibes. I think you could be good pals.
Oh, thank you.
But maybe I went with something a bit too obvious. So I went for, now, they're not known really as being an actor. They're more of a filmmaker. But Desiree Akhavan.
Yeah. Oh, she's so cool.
So she's very cool. Very good actor when she's in her own films.
Yeah,
she's Persian. Yeah. She's bi. And she's just like,
that's the list, baby.
So I don't know. Those are the people who first came to my head. But I think she'd do a good job. She's kind of cool and I'm a bit scared of her. So like that's the kind of feeling I sometimes have with you. So like I feel like she's very charming, funny, and cool, and smarter than me, but can also beat me up. So like that's the kind of vibe you give me.
That is actually exactly how I want to be presenting in the world. So that's ideal. Thank you.
And then Anahit, you were going to pick Ellie.
So I go for Ellie. So I just put into Google several times, like genderqueer and non-binary actors. And then every now and then they would suggest Ezra Miller.
Dear God, no.
Get the fuck out. Absolutely fucking not. So I came up with, I think if we were to do like a kind of completely agnostic like kind of generational, like picking someone kind of like Jamie was saying from any point in their career, like a kind of fantasy cast. I think Tilda Swinton would be really fun.
That'd be incredible.
I think that'd be sick. But I think if we were doing like more of a straightforward, we're making the film right now, I would say either Emma Corrin, maybe, or love of my life, Mae Martin. After our conversation the other day, I did rewatch Feel Good.
Those are all incredible picks. And I'm also just genuinely pleased because the only celebrity comparison that I ever get is Hunter Schafer. And I always I'm like, that's very flattering, but deep down I'm like, is it just because I'm trans femme and she's trans femme? And it's always by cis people. But that's great ammunition to practice my self-worth.
I thought of
you have similar hair as well. I think you're similar hairstyles.
But you have very good bone structure. And I feel like Emma Corrin and Tilda Swinton are also very famous for their very good bone structure. So that's like where I
sweet.
thought,
Thank you. You hear that, listeners? I have good bone structure. So
they have good bone structure.
Even if you can't see, just trust.
I have less good bone structure.
Yeah, what are we doing, Jamie?
This is I don't know. So you all put so much thought into them, and they're all so lovely and flattering to each other, and I'm just like...
You're going to ruin Jamie's life.
I'm not going to ruin Jamie's life.
Did you type in Ginger Man?
Well, okay. Let's be clear. You are ginger. And that's a very big part of most ginger actors kind of like... I don't know. I feel like it gives them a certain vibe. And I was thinking, like, but at the same time... You're a very good journalist. You're a very, like, curious person. You're, like, very, as you said earlier on, you're quite deadpan. You don't necessarily, like, give a lot of energy straight away. And I did begin to think about Domhnall Gleeson, and particularly Domhnall Gleeson in Ex Machina, which I thought was, like, very, I don't know, slightly detached, very skeptical sometimes. But at the same time, I looked that up, and I think that Domhnall Gleeson, I don't know this for sure, is, like, quite a similar age to you.
Maybe.
So, I think that was a pretty good one.
That is a really good one, actually.
Yeah.
But
I don't know that many other, like, ginger actors.
Although I get a feeling that Domhnall Gleeson often starts off as the good guy, but then you realise by the end of the film he's the bad guy. So
that's true. He's also had some, like, weird career turns recently. I feel like he sort of, like, dipped into obscurity. I think maybe Star Wars, like, ruined him or something, because he was kind of really underused in that.
Yeah, maybe.
But there was a time when he was, like, in everything. You could not avoid that man.
I will take that. He's a handsome fellow, Irish lad.
He's in Brooklyn, and he's not bad. He does get left.
Yeah, he gets dumped, you know. Yeah. He's often the dump boyfriend. Or he has a little sad sack energy. Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm a sad sack. I'm total sad sack.
He's made such a career out of it.
Yeah, he's done well. Who would we cast? I did literally put in bearded white British actor into Google to try and cast Peter, and the very first result is the Wikipedia page for Brian Blessed.
I feel like he would love that.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Now, Peter does a lot of this. Now, this might sound as an insult. I'm not saying you look like him, Peter, but Seth Rogen, he's got the same sort of energy, you know, kind of like smart aleck. I always think of Peter, to me, I don't think of his beard first. I think of actually, he's that kind of quick talker, you know, he's not actually not like a British person in terms of like the way he talks. He's got a Scottish accent, but he talks really quickly like an American. And
that's true, actually.
So I was thinking an American sort of person, and that's certainly those kind of like comedy guys from the kind of noughties. He could fit in with a few of those.
Yeah, that's true.
I think so. Also, I just completely blanked there.
And Seth Rogen sometimes wears a beard.
Yeah. And that's when he's hot. That's when everyone finds him hot as well. Like, remember how everyone just sort of changed their mind about Seth Rogen recently because he posted like a thirst trap on Twitter or something like that? And then he was like, he went from, I don't know, eye-rolling, annoying stoner comedy writer to like, DILF. Yeah,
he's definitely aging, looking better as he gets older. You know, he looks good in the studio, I think. Looks like he's got very good suits. I'm very jealous of his suits.
Did I tell you that I watched The Studio? I've seen like half of it on your recommendation. Yeah. Did I tell you about my experience watching it?
No.
We might have to bleep this out, but... So I was like feeling really anxious, so I asked my friend for a joint. And she gave, I think it was like a blunt, like it was all weed. There was nothing else in it, and I didn't realize, so I smoked half of it. So I was in the fucking sky. Like, I was not tethered to reality. I have to
watch a Seth Rogen movie right now.
In any way. And I was watching The Studio, and I was watching that first episode where it's the one that you were describing a few episodes ago, where he like talks about, he's talking to Martin Scorsese, and it's about like the Jonestown Massacre or whatever. And I was like, what is the Jonestown Massacre? And And so I spent a good hour stoned out of my mind reading the Wikipedia page for the Jonestown Massacre, which is horrendous.
Yeah.
It's not funny.
No.
It's so horrible. It was one of the most haunting hours of my life. And then apparently you can hear the recordings in some places, and I'm so glad I did not come across that.
Yeah.
All I did was like read all of the various things and then just like click on all the hyperlinks for a good like hour and a half. So I'm blaming that on you.
But you didn't drink the Kool-Aid.
I did not drink
But
the
now you know
Kool-Aid.
what that means.
I now know what it means. But also apparently, did you know it's not, because I know this now, it wasn't Kool-Aid. It was like some off-brand thing.
Poor John
And
said
then
they couldn't.
Kool-Aid got like the...
You're reading them for filth for not having this name brand Kool-Aid. That's the worst thing about the Jonestown
It's like
Massacre.
the Walmart off-brand.
I just think that's crazy. Anyway,
That is probably the worst thing I've heard about the Jonestown Massacre is they can't afford Kool-Aid.
didn't have actual Kool-Aid. Anyway, yeah, so...
Okay, so our cast. This is going to be a weird movie, I reckon. So who was it again? Desiree Cavan, Tilda Swinton,
Tilda Swinton, Domhnall Gleeson, and
Seth Rogen, maybe.
Seth Rogen.
I actually think that kind of fucks.
Yeah.
What's the genre of the podcast?
All the genre. It's the CineSkinny.
Oh, that'd be
Okay,
so
well, we'll
good.
get right in that. On to the second question. So this question comes from Rho Chung, who's our fantastic theory editor.
Hey, CineSkinny. My question is, when Harry Styles said that Don't Worry Darling really felt like a movie, what do you think he meant? And what other films really feel like a movie to you?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Because when he said that, it was obviously one of the stupidest fucking things that anyone has ever said. But it also made so much sense to me. I was like, yeah, you're right. Not even that Don't Worry Darling is good, because it's not good. But it is a movie. And I understand exactly what you mean by that. And I've been trying to break down in my mind why it intrinsically made so much sense. And I think what he's trying to say is it's an original idea, not an action film, but has sort of like action adjacent or like fantasy adjacent, like kind of imaginative sort of set piecey things, but isn't like a Jason Statham film, right? Like it's not like firmly within the action genre. So it's a little bit like genre fluid. Isn't like big budget tentpole, but is like mid to high budget filmmaking. Is an original idea, with like a really good cast and has like little, it's also like easy to watch, isn't like a kind of highbrow or artistic. So it's like in the mainstream, but it's not IP, I think, is sort of what he meant by that.
Yeah, I never saw Don't Worry Darling, so I don't necessarily feel like I can speak exactly what he meant, but I just assumed when I heard that quote that it was something to do with the fact that like so many movies that most people go and see in cinemas now will be those kind of like cinematic universe Marvel Disney properties, which to a varying degree are like movies made by committee, like somewhat formulaically, and like they're so self-referential and they're so kind of continuous, and it feels more like a TV show that you're tuning into. And like the reason that the Star Wars films stopped getting made is because they were shit, and the reason that they were shit is because like nobody had an idea for what to do with them. They just decided to make them and then make them up as they went along. So there's like no driving vision, which I assume is a thing that's prominent in Don't Worry Darling that you might not see in most mainstream movies.
Perhaps. I've not seen it either.
Wait, you guys haven't seen Don't Worry Darling?
No, I didn't bother.
Oh,
I wasn't
it's not
that into
good.
the Harry Styles Chris Pine rivalry that I felt
No, that's so fair.
I needed to do the reading.
No.
That's the thing, yeah. There's lots of like beef around it as well. Like, was it not if Florence Pugh wouldn't do any press, she fell out with them all?
There was like this rumor that was going around, because I was at Venice the year that it happened, when like Harry Styles maybe spat at Chris Pine, but
I love
actually
that.
didn't. Yeah, that was so, to be fair, that was iconic. And there was a rumor, and this is such like gossip, not true, not founded, allegedly, that she had been having an affair with Harry Styles, like when she was with Zach Braff, that they'd had like a thing.
Olivia.
No, Florence Pugh,
Ooh.
when she was with Zach Braff, and then he started his thing with Olivia Wilde. And then she was just like, fuck this.
Jesus.
But then, so that's like the kind of rumor one. And then there was like the slightly more grounded rumor one, which is that the two of that, like Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles were fucking around. And so Olivia Wilde just wasn't a very good director and wasn't hands-on at all. Yeah, it just, the amount of controversy that film generated for something that was so deeply mid, like so extremely mid, was crazy. I would say it's worth watching in that it really is a movie.
Well, I was going to say,
right.
I was going to say, I'm going to take everything that Harry Styles says with a pinch of salt. I reckon he's maybe one of these people who have maybe been in more movies than he's seen of films. He gives me that. You know, he was in a boy band. How many films did he get to see when he was like being thrown around the world by like,
but
Louis
then have
Walsh
you
and all
seen
that?
Charlie XCX's Letterboxd account?
Well, yeah,
She's watching a lot.
But she had years of like mediocrity. Like, so she probably had like loads of years. She wasn't like a kind of like factory product the way they were. You know, she like had years of like not doing that well. So
successful people don't have time to watch movies. That's why we're sat here watching.
Exactly.
Talking about.
Exactly. And then, do you remember when he made that? I know I called it Mr. Policeman on the show. My Policeman. I should get that right. Remember what he said about My Policeman as well? He said, I wrote it down. He said something like, so much gay sex in a film is two guys going at it, and then this film is much more about tenderness. But that's not true.
No, that's not true.
What gay films is he watching where people are going at it? Like,
yeah, that man has watched gay porn, and that is it. That's crazy.
Think of like all the big, like Brokeback Mountain, Moonlight. It's all very kind of subtle. It's all about the tenderness. It's not about the sex. Yeah. So yeah, I just get the sense he hasn't watched many films. What I was thinking, he's just thinking of Oscar bait, is what I was thinking, because like so many people are talking up this film, saying, "Oh, this is going to win all the Oscars." There was all the kind of, Olivia Wilde's going to be, I think not the first, but she's going to be in the conversation for best director, and then it did nothing, didn't it? So it's like I in my head I put it with like all the George Clooney films. How George Clooney tries to win an Oscar every year, and he makes like really mid films. Something talk with JD Vance, that Hellbilly Elegy film.
Oh yeah,
exactly. It's those films that seem like, that looks like it's going to be an in contention movie, but actually it's just a boring mid movie.
Yeah, but then there's a difference, I feel, between that kind of Oscar bait movie and then the other Oscar bait movies. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there are different tiers.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I haven't seen it, so I could be off with my analysis. But essentially saying, I'm not taking any advice from Harry Styles.
No. He's full of shit. But I made a little list, actually. I was like, what else feels like a movie to me? Like Indiana Jones, I think, is the quintessential that's a movie. Sinners recently, Top Gun Maverick, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. Like those to me are all. Do you see the genre? So I'm like working with it.
See, I wouldn't put. Well, I've not seen it, but you would put those in that kind of genre, like action.
Yeah,
it feels like a movie.
Yeah, it's like a movie.
Ah,
I'm trying to identify the genre. You've described a lot of hot climates.
I think the genre is just like, it's original storytelling. There's like a little bit of like momentum, action, like plot. It's quite plot heavy, actually. Maybe that's it. It's plot heavy rather than character heavy in some ways. There are like some themes. But you know what? I don't know. I know what I mean?
I don't know. Like, I think that, like, yeah,
I'm in the dark. I've not seen the films, so I've no idea.
I don't know. Like, they're kind of revolving around action, but the action isn't necessarily just what's meant to be satisfying the audience.
Yeah, it's not like Transformers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just feel like maybe it is that kind of, like mid to high budget. And the way that the film industry works these days is any sort of high budget film has now become so like IP, tentpole, part of like a cinematic universe, part of a franchise. And this is like harkening back to the days where like the big film of the year would not be that.
Yeah.
In a way.
And it's not like a quiet, sensitive art house film.
Exactly. Yeah. That like in-between space.
Right. Clearly we have to just do the Don't Worry Darling episodes where we go back and revisit this masterpiece.
Yeah, honestly, maybe we should.
Okay, we'll add that to the list. So question 3 comes from Phoebe Willison, who is our wonderful designer.
Hello, CineSkinny. A long-time listener, first-time caller here. My question is, do you think it's cooler to be a director who like hones in and does one thing really well? We're talking Wes Anderson. I'm sure that's debatable, but you get what I mean. Quentin Tarantino, etc. Or one with range. For example, Danny Boyle. Thank you.
Who would like to go first here?
Oh, well, this is one of your picks, I thought.
Well, I could go first if you want. I kind of like this question because I'm a kind of fan of the auteur theory. I know it's not cool nowadays to think the auteur theory is cool. It's like everybody, loads of people make a film, it takes a village and all this. But I do think there's something, especially being a critic, it's very useful to think of films in terms of, a creator has got their fingerprints on it. And I think I really enjoy watching films of a filmmaker who I like and see all their films and try and sort of find the sort of like threads. So obviously somebody like Wes Anderson, the threads are very obvious. Mm-hmm. But I would challenge Phoebe's question. I would say that actually all good filmmakers do leave threads. So even somebody like Danny Boyle, who seems to be ostensibly doing a completely different film each time, I think there are things that Danny Boyle comes back to in all his films. So like, for example, just if you look at the editing of his films, like even when he's making a kind of slower paced film, he still get really snappy. His films like really move in a certain way, which is a very kind of Danny Boyle thing. The way he uses music is very distinctive. I think he uses music in a very interesting way. And then he's got themes like money comes out in so many of his films. There's always about money changing hands or people trying to get hold of money. Obviously that's a kind of universal theme, but it's like something that is interested in him. He's interested in class and moving class and things like that. You think of Trainspotting, you think of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you think of Shallow Grave, and guilt and paranoia is also a thing that he comes back to. So I would challenge Phoebe and say a good director probably does have the same themes and all probably are doing the same thing. Just some of them are more obvious about it than others. That's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, it's not necessarily that a director will always have the same themes that they bring up, but they maybe reveal that they have a kind of consistent relationship with one theme. Like, I don't know, I sort of feel like if I think of someone like Guy Ritchie, who did these really like gritty crime films in the 2000s, right, were incredibly like hyper violent and sometimes quite like, I don't know, culturally a bit weird, but he kind of then went on to do like the Sherlock Holmes films, and I think he got roped into one of the live action Disney films, and now he's doing these weird, almost Tarantino-like kind of like back and forth, sort of like edited in a very weird way.
I think he did Aladdin as well.
Yeah, that's the sort of live action one that he got stuck doing. And he's got something coming out now that's like, God, what's it called? It's like like an adventure, like a family sort of adventure film. But, or maybe I'm wrong.
Is that the one with Natalie Portman and John Krasinski? No, is that something else?
Maybe I've just completely misread that. But either way, like, I think that he does kind of like, even though in stuff like his more recent film, was it The Gentleman, which is like all about this sort of huge crime empire, and it tries to take a less flattering view of its characters. It tries to kind of, I don't know, not glorify the violence as much, but I still think that like he's kind of working against himself. He's of two minds. He's sort of struggling with trying to be very critical of these like, crazy crime bosses and trying not to make them look too flattering, but at the same time he just makes violence, he just films violence in such a stylish way that it kind of betrays this habit of his that he's had throughout his career, this relationship with how kind of cool violence is to see on film. I
mean, there's similar with like Martin Scorsese, that's his big criticism. He's like makes all these gangster films criticizing gangsters, but actually he makes them look cool as fuck, so that's the issue.
When I was thinking of this question, I think my answer is quite similar to yours, Jamie. I thought of Jane Campion, who I think has made generically quite different films in terms of like tone and pace and genre. So you have something like The Piano is like this period piece. In The Cut is like this kind of, it was the first film that was made in New York after 9/11. Like it's so kind of a product of the noughties. You have Power of the Dog that's like kind of set on this ranch. Like they're all like very different in seeing that through line between them is like quite tricky. But they are all about desire, right? And they're all approaching desire. Angel at the Table as well, which is like that really long kind of one about the author, and it's like really slow paced, but they're all kind of thinking through, what does it mean to like want things and like want a certain life and like blah, blah, blah. And I think that is what I find really exciting. Not so much when the director has like this kind of auteur thing in terms of like an aesthetic or a style necessarily, but more when they have these like ongoing preoccupations and obsessions and they're trying to approach that from all of these different angles. And I really love seeing that kind of through line, which I think makes sense actually. Do you guys think like in your writing you have a through line? You have things that you...
like in terms of like topics you approach, or kind of just like your style?
Yeah, like if someone were to look at everything you've written, they'd be like, this is what this person is interested in.
Oh, interesting.
I think I would say I mean, just generally, because I do a lot of interviews, I'm probably drawn to people who have similar things, and so like the themes that I would
like. Yeah, there's ideas that I try and bring to the surface that I kind of think are important and worth sharing. But I don't know. I guess you kind of want to think of yourself as quite a versatile writer who can write about lots of different things. But maybe you're right. Maybe there is something kind of evident that you yourself can't see.
Yeah, I wonder if there is just an inevitability in the creative process where your like identity almost comes to the surface in terms of what you keep returning to again and again, or how you approach things, even if you're not intending to. Yeah. You know?
But I think that's like a good artist, isn't it? Like you're even like, you know, the idea is like, even if you're trying to hide who you are, it comes out somehow in your art.
Yeah.
You know, like, so like, you know, it should be, if you're doing it well, you know, you're usually putting yourself into it somehow. You know, if you're not just like, obviously there are kind of hack journeyman people who probably don't put any of themselves into their work. But like, if you're trying to like do something well, I think you have to put yourself into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And that might be a filmmaker like Wes Anderson, it comes out aesthetically, or it might be like you say somebody like Jane Campion comes more thematically, and more your kind of like your obsessions in terms of like themes. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, Paul Thomas Anderson. That's another one that I was trying to think like, who is the other person that does ones where they seem to have almost nothing in common, but then almost all of Paul Thomas Anderson's films are about two weird little guys.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right.
Like in some way, it's about like what happens when you put like weird people in relation to each other and they're just being fucking mental.
Yeah, it's usually, you're right, about kind of like ambition and like, I don't know. Yeah, you're so right. And
yeah, and like people working within like
dualities.
Yeah, dualities and like within power structures and how do you kind of but then if you describe the plot of the films, like There Will Be Blood and what's the one about the porn industry?
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights and Mark Wahlberg apologized to God for, which I find so funny. Like in theory, those two films have like nothing in common, but they are about this kind of like finding yourself like in relation to people and within systems of chaos and like working under capitalism and like all of this stuff that all like the same kind of preoccupations.
And I was gonna say, I think that's how sometimes I don't really get filmmakers until I've seen like a handful of their films. Like sometimes I remember when I was younger, I would watch Almodovar and I was like, oh, I like it, but I don't really get it. And then I've watched like 5 or 6 of his films. Then I realized, all right, this guy is interested in certain things and he brings them back and that's like referenced again and again. And it kind of enriches your experience of it, I think.
Yeah.
So I think we like people who not necessarily do the same thing, but are like the same things crop up.
The same things crop up. Yeah.
Sounds good. Number 4. So this question comes from Roy Doherty, who has just moved from Edinburgh to London, and he's in the middle of... Well, I'll just read out his question. That's what he said. I've just moved away from Edinburgh to London, and the first months have been focused on navigating the big change. What are the best films about moving somewhere bigger, and what observations in the films resonate with you?
So I took a while to think about this one because all of the films that I could think about moving to a new place are like horror films, like the Amityville Horror and the others and stuff like that, where characters always seem incredibly punished for moving to a new house. And I don't know what's up with that. That's weird. But like, in terms of like when I started to think about films about moving, the most evident thing to kind of leap out at me was Studio Ghibli films. Because it's such a common sort of plot point in Studio Ghibli films. If you think about like Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro, it's usually about children who are being moved to a new home by their parents, and the kind of, like the big grand adventure of like finding yourself in a new place opens them up to these like really magical, literal magical realist experiences, but also these coming of age narratives. And if you think of stuff in like Kiki's Delivery Service, which is not just about moving to a new place, but kind of like having a new job as well and trying to build it all up, your job and your home and your family, and I don't know what's right and what's wrong with you. And then even up to like The Boy and the Heron, that starts with this kid who's like been moved as a result of war. So like a really common thing here. And I think that's a huge focus if we were talking about directors and their focuses of Hayao Miyazaki is childhood and like the huge impact that moving has on you and how he sees it very much as an adventure and uses that as a structure for a film. So like, I don't know, those always like are a huge source of comfort for me. I think that those are the best films about moving, but I also understand that, you know, when you're an adult moving to London, like that's a bigger thing. So if you're looking for like a more sophisticated film about moving, one that, I don't know, addresses like social mobility or racial prejudice, and you don't necessarily just want like a family-friendly animated film, you want something a little bit more highbrow, I would say like Shrek 2 or something. Which is also a masterpiece, by the way. I'm taking no comments on this.
As an argument. Yeah, I kind of struggled with this question. I don't think I've watched that many films. The thing that like immediately came to mind, and I can't even name specific examples, is that classic Hallmark, like Christmas rom-com-y thing of like, the big city girl moves to the small town guy moves to the big city. And I love that shit.
Yeah.
So I think that's great, but I don't think it's a blueprint for how life does or should work. The one that came to mind for me was Brooklyn, actually, the Saoirse Ronan one. Because that is so... And it actually brings in, which is kind of the underlying... It's obviously not for Rory, but I think for a lot of people, that idea of migration is a really big part of moving. Like, it's not always in this sort of socioeconomic, like, oh, just I'm moving to the cool new town. Like, it is across, like, countries, across borders, and there's all of these, like, heavy emotional, like, complications that come with it. And I think Brooklyn does that really, really well. And I think I was so charmed by Brooklyn when it came out. And now I'm like, okay, it's actually, like, it's pretty average-ish film, but she's actually so fucking good in it. And it does really capture that sense of being caught between two places, right? That, like, it means that you have a home in two places, but it also means that you're always, like, missing or feeling like the absence of another place and not quite at home. And it does that really, really well. The other one I thought of was Mulholland Drive. So two very different films. Which again, maybe it's not a blueprint for anything. I don't know. But it's good.
Yeah, I struggled a little bit as well. Basically because I think you've pointed out something that it is most times in movies, it's a big city slicker moving to a smaller place and learning something about, you know, how to live a more simple life, you know, like something like Local Hero, for example, you know, like there's lots of films in that genre of a kind of city slicker, you know, being taught like there's more to life than money. Rory's went the opposite way. he's went to the big city. So, and also that I couldn't think of, because a lot of them are also immigrant stories, and I really don't think going from Scotland to you know, from Edinburgh to London is that different. I mean, let's face it, London and Edinburgh can get closer. Maybe it's harder to get some iron brew. Yeah. But otherwise, So I thought of it more as like, it's actually more about career. So Rory, maybe this is giving too much away, but we know Rory, and Rory's a journalist, and part of the reason I think he's moved to London is because he started being a freelance journalist, and it's much easier to get kind of connections and see films down there. So I thought of a film which I love, and I've mentioned it on the show before, Working Girl.
I thought you were going to say Griffith. Coyote Ugly.
That also works, actually. Okay, let's do Coyote Ugly. I'll change my mind. Yeah. So that's so in Coyote Ugly, she's moving from Jersey to like New York, and it's like obviously not a big deal, but to her it's like a big deal. You could actually just do it in a day. Anyway, and like so, I guess I'm a bit closer. I'm doing Staten Island to Manhattan, which is like a ferry ride, but it feels like a long way away for Melanie Griffith's character, who's Tess, I think it is. She's like, because it's more about class. It's like but somebody who like you are seen as a kind of bumpkin if you've came from Staten Island, and maybe you are seen like a bumpkin if you come from Edinburgh. You probably are, you know, like in London. So like, but it's about kind of not letting the bastards grind you down. Essentially, this film is like about how like actually, you know, like you can use your smarts and your everything you've got. Essentially, your body. What's her great line? She says, "I've got a body for sin and a brain for." Anyway, Rory, you've got a body for sin and a brain for journalism. You'll make it, Rory. So, no, but yeah, it's a good film about just showing like just traveling across a body of water can be a completely different world, and you can be treated completely differently. Yeah, it's about kind of like it's a kind of a naive film maybe because you know it's obviously a Hollywood film. She wins in the end. She makes it up the corporate ladder, and she doesn't even get corrupted too much by it, which is like quite rare in life. I think, you know, like trying to be that kind of trying to move up the corporate ladder can corrupt people. But yeah, so I would just say, Rory, stick that film on. It's amazing. Just pretend you're Tess driving down the the motorway or the train from Edinburgh to London. And yeah, that's
Find yourself.
Exactly. So the next one is another Skinny regular, Carmen Paddock. She asks,
hello, CineSkinny. I have a question. What is the best and/or the worst film you've watched with your parents?
Good question. Who wants to go first here? Anahit, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't have a worst film in mind, partly because my parents are not very big film people, so they won't really experiment, and if they, within 5 minutes or something, they'll get bored and leave. So there's never been really those, like, the films that are really violent or really, like, explicit or whatever, like, they just wouldn't watch anyway. So I don't really have a lot of experience with that. I do have, like, this really, really fond memory of, I think when I was, like, 8 or 9, I think it was, like, the first year that we'd moved out of London, and it was Halloween. And for some reason, I just really liked Halloween as a kid. I don't know why. I used to, like, make these little paper masks, and I'd, like, make a little mask workshop every, like, October. It was, like, quite sweet, and I think my mum knew I liked it. And they are not into scary films. Like, my mum thinks horror is, like, bad. Like, probably, like, immoral in some way. But she got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade from the, like, video store, which I had never seen any of the Indiana Jones before. I remember we, like, sat down on the floor and had, like, a little picnic, and they put it on. And obviously that film, when you're 8, is kind of scary. Like, that bit, like, right at the end, I found really frightening. Like, when the man...
You've chosen poorly.
He had chosen poorly. Yeah. And then it gets, like, fucked. And so, like, it fulfilled that role of, like, what I needed it to be, which is, like, oh, we watched a scary film. But it wasn't actually scary because they're not, like, horror films or whatever. It was just, like, really cute, and it was really nice. And I think I've obviously, like, got very into films as an adult, and my parents are just not really into a lot of that stuff. And so I don't really have, like, a connection with them along those lines most of the time. But there are, like, a couple of films since in my childhood that actually they introduced me to Hitchcock. Actually, I watched Psycho with them for the first time, and a couple of others. So yeah, like, I think those feel quite, like, special. And I still think it's the best Indiana Jones film. I think it's one of the best films ever made. Like, it's so perfect. So funny.
Although I'd say for Halloween, I would say Temple of Doom is scarier.
It is scarier, yeah, but also more racist.
Yeah,
that's true. Well,
so unfortunately, not for my family.
Fair.
I have a worst one. I don't have a best one, but I have a worst film that I watched with my parents, and it's not because it was like I don't know, there's sex in it. And, oh God, but like. This is a film that my parents really wanted to rewatch because they insisted it was great. You might notice that in the last 6 months there have been loads of memorials and retrospectives for one of the most beloved filmmakers of all time, and all of these retrospectives tend to leave out one of his works, which he himself tried to abandon. But in 2019, when Denis Villeneuve's Dune was coming out, my dad was like, I remember seeing David Lynch's Dune in the 1980s, and I thought it was so cool. I thought it was just such a fun film. He absolutely insisted that as a teenager or whatever, he found it about as compelling as, like, Star Wars or whatever. And I had not seen it.
Oh my God.
And I informed him that the only thing I know about this film is that it's considered one of the worst films of all time, and that David Lynch tried to take his name off of it in earlier cuts. And he was like, no, it's quite good. Let's watch it. Now, there is, like, one merit to David Lynch's Dune, which is that it has a weird fixation with putting men in sexy, slutty sci-fi costumes. Like, Sting shows up in his pants, and Kyle MacLachlan has a nipple thing going on that you've just got to check out. But I feel like that's not really the sort of thing that dads look for in films. So...
Well,
the film,
it depends on the dad, I guess.
I guess it depends on the dad, but pretty much the entire rest of the film is, like, incredibly racially uncomfortable, like, violently homophobic, and kind of just persistently, like, gross and uncomfortable, kind of like the last 10 minutes of Fire Walk with Me, but with, like, Harkonnens and space worms and stuff like that. And, like, worst of all, I mean, that's why I hate the film, but worst of all, as you pointed out, like, it's a long film. It's long, it's meandering, and it's terribly paced, and that's what parents cannot abide by in film. So that was probably one of the worst experiences of film watching that I had in the time. Actually, I found out that Alejandro Jodorowsky, who attempted to make a Dune adaptation in the 70s that was going to be like 14 hours long or something like that.
Oh my God.
When he went to go see David Lynch's Dune, he felt like relieved at how bad it was because it meant that like, oh, if David Lynch can't do it, then it's unadaptable. It's an unmakeable film. But the Denis Villeneuve one is like pretty good.
The Denis, I like the first one.
I liked it. My dad liked it. So what the fuck does Jodorowsky know? What
did your dad say when Lynch's Dune finished?
That was worse than I remember.
Oh, baby.
Memory's amazing, actually. There's many films that I think are good and then see them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's good not to go back.
I don't have too much to say here. My parents were incredibly liberal, actually, it's completely opposite, and let me watch whatever I wanted, which is probably a bad thing. Like, I remember being scared by watching like Nightmare on Elm Street really early, and I would watch Halloween. Like, I remember actually we had like a video van that came around we called him Dobie. I don't know what his name was, but it was like he owned a video shop 2 towns over, and basically once a week or twice a week he would come with the film, with like really old films that weren't selling anymore, and he would bring it around in a van to our village, and it was kind of weird. And I remember picking up like how it worked was like basically mum would just give me like money and I would just rummage around, and usually she'd be chatting to like Dobie and I'd say, oh, I've got 4 films, here's like 5 or whatever. And I would always like, me and my sister would always get like an adult kind of like live action kind of thing, and we'd get a cartoon, and we must have been about like 5 or 6. We were pretty young, and I remember my mum and my auntie coming into the room and finding one of the cartoons we picked up. It was a porno.
What?
Oh my God.
Like they hadn't checked, and it was like
an animated one.
It was an animated porno called. It was like a George of the Jungle kind of thing, like a Tarzan thing.
Okay, that's like 3 weird things to come together.
But anyway, that is probably the worst thing. Like,
did you watch it?
Yes, me and my sister watched it. This is weird. Like, and it's. And I did some research and I found it. It's like, if you look at, like, I can't actually remember its name, but it's on like kind of X video or something like that. But I did watch a little bit. I did watch a few minutes. It's actually quite tame. It's like very much like the kind of like like how British films into the kind of like what the milkman saw, what the window cleaner
I'm thinking
saw,
stuff like Ralph Bakshi did all those like naughty cartoons.
Yeah, it's kind of like Fritz Cat, but it's a bit more kind of racist than Fritz Cat, but it's not. I mean, we probably saw Fritz Cat when I was a kid as well. But anyway, that was probably the worst thing because I think.
Oh my God.
My mum. I think partly because my auntie was there as well, but she was quite shocked at what we were seeing. There was like a woman having sex with a monkey and stuff. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think you win that question.
Yeah, you really do. She walks in and it was like on the screen.
Yeah, she says, "What the hell?" She's just as a cartoon. She saw the cover. It looks like a Tarzan film.
That's crazy.
If you look a bit closer, I should have saw Tarzan's while he was out, but. And we were innocent kids. We didn't know what we were watching. We just wanted a cartoon we hadn't seen.
That's crazy. Were your parents into film?
We'd watch films. Like that was like something we do quite a lot. Watch films together. I would say they weren't super into film. Like but like they would like pick out, like say, they would say things like, "Oh, Blade Runner's on. That's a really good film. You should watch that, Jamie." That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But like they weren't like beyond like the kind of more. They knew kind of roughly what the big classics were.
Right.
But and they would kind of point me in the direction.
But you would watch like Nightmare on Elm Street when you were small?
Yeah.
Wow, no.
Yeah.
No.
It was really irresponsible. But, did
it scare you?
Yes.
Yeah.
but I enjoyed being scared. I actually like being scared. It's actually a sensation I enjoy.
Wow, that's crazy.
Okay, what's next?
George's question?
Sorry, I missed George's question. Right, okay. So George Sully has a question for us as well. George Sully, who is the director of Fest and part of the sales team at the Skinny, he asks...
Long-time listener, first-time caller. My question is, what is your dream director's dinner party? You can pick 3, living or dead. And what movie would you put on afterwards for everyone to watch?
You know, when I first saw this question, I made a joke in my head of any 3 of the Polanski signatories and I'm making rat poison. I guess for that matter, Polanski could be one of them. And I can't think of anything else now. Also because I'm a terrible cook, so... Well, I'm not going to invite Martin Scorsese around for microwave mac and cheese.
What would you do, Jamie? I'm still thinking.
I just think most filmmakers are actually kind of boring, aren't they? Let's face it. Most filmmakers are a bit too obsessed on their own films and stuff. So you don't want to be bored by people. So I'm going to pick people who I've seen talk and seem really interesting. So the first one's John Waters, very funny guy, like lots of great stories, very witty. I'm going to pick Agnes Varda. who is like so charming, so funny, and like again, a great filmmaker. But like actually, she's not like the new wave people who were like obsessed with movies. Her first movie she made when she'd seen only a handful of films. So like she's just got like knows about everything, art, history, politics. She'd be really fun. And then Orson Welles, I will stop in my tracks whenever somebody puts like an Orson Welles like press conference or old interview up, because Orson Welles could talk. He's got this great like voice and this great way of speaking, and he's very direct, very political person. And again, he just hates the studio. He'd be like anti-capitalist. So I think we'd have a really good fun chat about like not just movies, because that's the worry when you get too many movie people together. It would be like just talking about films all the time.
What film would you put on for all three of those directors?
I didn't think of that, but I think since Jungle
Book porn parody. I feel like John Waters at least would like
John
that.
Waters would like that actually. Maybe. Well, I don't know. It'd be good to get Wells' take on some new films, maybe. So like, but I should maybe just put on one of John Waters. Put on like a I don't know.
You
like
put on one of his films.
Polyester. Why not? Let's have a laugh.
I picked Greta Gerwig mostly because I just think she seems like fun chat. I think she would be great. I also picked Agnes Varda.
Oh yeah.
Because I think she would also be fun chat. And then I picked Andy Samberg, who has technically directed a few things just because I think he's hot. He has director credits on Letterboxd, and so that's all we need to know.
So hold on, so you're chatting him up while Greta...
Yeah, they can have like a nice chat together.
All right,
Yeah, they can, and then,
Okay.
And then the film that I would put on for all of them, I actually think Crystal Mazel's Skate Kitchen would work really well with that, because it has sort of slightly, themes about like girlhood. It has that almost like documentarian sensibility that I think Agnes Varda would like. Andy Samberg is a self-professed feminist. So it's the kind of film that a feminist man would like. Do you know what I mean? It has that energy. So I think that would go down a treat. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, I don't really know. I think you're onto something with like thinking about directors who have like really fun personalities, because I don't necessarily know that many of them that have that fun personality. I keep seeing clips of like David Lynch being funny, and I feel like David Lynch would be a good shout.
He'd be good, yeah.
I think Iowa Debiri counts as a director, right? She's at least done episodes of
she would be
The
so
Bear
fun.
and stuff like that. So Iowa Debiri for one. And then who else? I don't know. I guess if they're like living and dead, I think one of the most interesting ones to do would be someone from is it Georges Méliès who did like A Trip to the Moon?
Oh yeah.
And then just put on, you're right, like something new, and just be like, what do you think?
Put on Arrival. Be like,
Yeah.
They did it better.
Yeah. But there's so many films that use the clip from A Trip to the Moon. Like I don't know, like it shows up in like Lisa Frankenstein and stuff like that. So you could,
you could show him Hugo.
Yeah, Hugo as well. Yeah.
Be like, Martin Scorsese and Georges Méliès together, and then screen Hugo, and then see if they fight.
So we're on to the quick fire round now. Although we can answer these as quickly or as briefly or as...
Yeah, I do kind of feel like I picked what in your mind makes a film sexy, but thinking about it, I feel like we have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, we have a lot to say about that.
Well, here's a quick one. This is from Dee, who's our amazing designer. That's not Didi's role. Didi is our production manager and art director.
Yeah. I sometimes also say designer because I'm like, well, she does design but things. That's like literally not her job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Didi's cool, and she asked, which character would make the worst flatmate?
For me, it's like within that genre of like stoner men in the noughties. Do you know what I mean? I watched Superbad for the first time the other day.
How was that?
Not funny.
I've never seen it.
Not good.
I just know, is that the one with the McLovin joke?
Yeah.
All that I know about that film is that everyone in high school just made that joke nonstop. And I was like, this isn't funny.
It's barely a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not enjoy it. But I think something along those lines, Seth Rogen before he got sexy. Mm-hmm. You know, like that kind of the knocked up, the man-child, like energy of like young men. Even that way that like noughties.
Around that time, like Greg Araki was doing like stoner comedies, and like they're good and they're like weird and fun and tacky, but they're also annoying.
Yeah,
they're also like these aren't
exactly.
nice, fun people to hang out
with. No, absolutely not. So I think for me, probably that.
Yeah. When I think of flatmates, the first film that comes to mind about flatmates you've already mentioned is Shallow Grave. And I don't know, all of them. any of the characters from Shallow Grave, they're all annoying and unhinged and quite frightening in very different ways.
I was thinking Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That would be bad. I bet he doesn't do the dishes.
Well, he's got bad chat.
Yeah.
He's got power tool running all night.
Yeah.
He's doing sort of amateur butchery in the kitchen. That's going to be messy. God knows what that meat is in the fridge. I bet he smells bad as well. He doesn't, And his family are awful. If they come round, it's just a nightmare.
He has a family?
Yeah.
Of other Leatherfaces?
Well, I think he's the one that has the Leatherface, but he has a whole family of
they're just evil hillbillies, and he's like the monster or whatever.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize
it's like a whole inbred kind of family. They've got a dad who's like almost dead, like a grandfather who's like barely alive.
Wow.
And
okay.
They're all kind of terrible in their own way, but some of them are more kind of like socially acceptable than others.
Okay.
You should watch it.
Them. And I'm not going to watch it. Are you fucking kidding?
Okay, this question is from Emma Smakalova, who is one of our sales team.
Hi, CineSkinny. This is Emma. My question for you is, what film would you want to have a theme park ride made out of it? Excited to hear what you come up with.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
I think
that would be fun.
I don't know. I was also thinking of because presumably the films that would best be theme park rides are already theme park rides, like Star Wars and stuff like. These are now films that are getting made just to fuel more theme park rides. So you'd have to go in the complete opposite direction of something that doesn't work at all. What There Will Be Blood you mentioned earlier? Or something like
honestly, that'd be sick.
Just something unbelievable, something where it's okay, somehow take this incredibly dreary, dense, and quite horrible film and make it fun.
Yeah, exactly.
assuming that when we say theme park ride, we mean with all of the safety regulations and oversight that keep theme park rides safe. You could do Final Destination or something like that. A theme park ride that just seems like a theme park ride, then seems like it goes off the rails somehow.
Oh my god, that'd be
too scary. My issue is I don't really like theme parks or roller coasters. I just don't like it. I like scary films. I don't like physical danger. It's just not my bag. So I was gonna go something why not just My Dinner with Andre?
Yeah,
as a theme park. So
on a little teacup ride.
Yeah, you just got you have a nice dinner with
Wallace Shawn.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's not. Who's Andre? He's not. He's Wally. Whoever plays Andre, I can't remember the actor. You'd have just a nice dinner with an old friend, who just chat about some stuff, have some food, leave, go home.
No, I want a ride that takes you through the suburban dissolution of marriage. But then it's also kind of sexy. That's my dream.
Talking of sexy. What in your mind makes a sexy film? And sorry. That's not right. What in your mind makes a film sexy is the question. And this comes from Emma, who is a listener on Instagram.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot. I feel if I think of really sexy moments I think what makes a film sexy is what makes life sexy, right? In that it's chemistry, tension, and directness. So something you were talking about Moonstruck earlier, I think that speech that Nicolas Cage makes to Cher is one of the sexier moments in cinema. And it's because they've had all of this really good chemistry. They've had all of this really good tension. And he just says to her, now will you get upstairs and get in my bed? And that's a crazy thing to say to someone. That's so hot. And I think all of the films that I'm it's films that stimulate that sense of you being in relation to someone in some way, right? It's not just about, and it's where all of that discourse around the sex scene and the Marvel, everyone's hot and no one's horny thing comes in. Whereas it's not just people that are hot. It's not good enough to just put two sexy people next to each other. You have to create that feeling of someone wants you, you want them, and the kind of messy ways that happens.
Yeah.
I think for me, when it feels like life, then I'm oh.
I think you're so right. I think that there's a little bit of imperfection in it that makes it so much more relatable and realistic, because real life attraction involves imperfections.
Yeah.
So I think of the exact same thing with the everyone's sexy, no one's horny. Was that what you're saying?
Everyone's hot and no one's horny.
Everyone's hot, no one's horny is the different, I think I've made this exact point on the podcast before, but like the whole thing that like Vin Diesel, who's a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons, created a like numerical scoring system for his character in the Fast and the Furious movies, so that if he gets punched a certain amount of times, he has to punch an equal amount of times in return, so the audiences like won't think that he's getting beaten up more than he's beating people up.
Wow.
And that smacks of like insecurity, and like that's not sexy. Whereas in a film like The Batman, you see Robert Pattinson, it's not about him being Batman as like this ninja who can fly out and beat everyone up. He gets the shit kicked out of him in that film.
It's so hot.
And it's so hot how he just keeps going on with it. And I do think that there's like a truth to that the last couple years, the sexiest films that everyone have been talking about have been like challengers. And some might say that there's actually nothing about like incredibly desperate tennis players sweating all over you. Love Lies Bleeding, in which like Kristen Stewart in the first 5 seconds has her arm fully up a horribly blocked toilet. And even recently like Sinners and stuff like that. Like Sinners is a very sexy film, but like there's something incredibly feral about it. The very sexy scene that everyone keeps talking about is something that people like, I don't know, it's a little over the top. It's a little like freaky, but like that's what makes it so much more sexy.
Yeah, for sure.
The way I see it is like, what makes a film sexy is also what makes a film good, because I think good films, you can imagine the characters doing stuff off screen that aren't in service of the plot. Like Ant-Man is doing, I don't think of what Ant-Man does in his day-to-day life. Ant-Man exists to do like the adventure shit, you know, like he doesn't really, I can't think of him going to the toilet, I can't think of him making dinner, you know, like you know what I mean? But like real, if somebody feels real, you can imagine them doing all sorts, which would include obviously having sex, because everyone has sex. So like that's the issue. It's like you need a character who feels that they have a life beyond what I'm seeing in these 90 minutes. So obviously there's some films where have sex in it as well, and some of them aren't actually that sexy. So it's not having sex. If it's just mechanical as part of the plot, it's someone who actually I believe that they were doing stuff before this film started.
Yeah.
And they're going to be doing stuff after this film started.
Yeah.
So like a good example is something like Keanu Reeves. Think of Keanu Reeves in like Speed, for example. That's a sexy film. There's something because that's got downtime. He feels like a real person. He's chatting away to like, you know, Sandy, you know, little Sandy. And like, you know, they're flirting. They're like, you could like, oh, these people have a life outside of this one situation they're in. Then, you know, if you, like there's other like, I'm trying to think of like, you know, John Wick, for example, is less sexy because I think John Wick is just a machine who's out off to do stuff.
Yeah.
It's like it's just he's going from one plot to one plot to one plot. So it's like it's about kind of feeling they've got a life beyond.
Yeah, I think that's also so true that it's not about the mechanics of it. Like I think what makes a film sexy is when the film is not about sex, it's about desire. Like I think that is what's interesting and what is like quote unquote titillating to watch, but that's like what you're kind of invested in, because the actual mechanics of sex, then that's like in a way like pornography, which is also like whatever, like fine, but I think for me what cinema can do, what like narrative can do, is it can articulate those moments like before and after, which are where that like energy is, right? I think that for me, it's more about like how it's like the internal process of what it means to want someone rather than the actual consummation of that. Right?
Also, bums, willies, and boobs is good as well.
Yeah.
Let's have more.
That also can do the trick. Yeah.
Actually, you should read Sean Lynn's book, which is all about like, the sex scene and the power of it and the politics of it, and how it's missing from the screen right now.
Yeah.
So that I should say Sean Lynn Tam, who's a very good writer and journalist who sometimes writes for the Skinny, but writes all over the places.
Yeah.
What we've done it, guys. We're almost there. We've got one question left.
We have one question left. We're going to end on such a downer.
So this question comes from Rachel Ashton, who is our arts editor. She asks, what is the most overrated film scene? And Rachel put in a caveat that she thinks it's Ghost, the very sexy scene where Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore like throw down some clay. I think that's a great scene, and I think I can see what maybe I'm overrated because like it's so kind of cliched and like being like copied so many times, but I think it's a great scene. But does anybody have any ideas of film of a scene they think is overrated?
I think in recent months, something I watched that I was a bit like, okay then, was the ending of Chinatown, where I just didn't really get, like, you know, like someone had like told me to watch it, they were like, oh my God, like, and this ending and the line, and like, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. And then I happened and I was like, sorry, who cares? I didn't really understand why. Like, yeah, like the end and like how it ends and like, you know, that sort of like spiraling tragedy of it, I think is structurally like really well done and interesting. I think as a line, like I was just like, I don't understand why this line of all lines has become so famous. I didn't really get it. And I thought it was like fine, you know, like good, but fine.
I guess to me, it doesn't really make sense, the line, because most of the film's not about Chinatown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's also a little bit like, what are you talking about? I don't know. Yeah, so I always found that quite...
I guess for me, that scene is so powerful, I kind of forget the line. Almost like it's not...
but then it's the line that everyone talks about.
That's true,
yeah.
I don't know, like, I was trying to think of, like, particular scenes, but you're kind of right, like, when I think of, I don't know, overrated film scenes or whatever, like, stuff that is under constant parody, like the kind of scene from Titanic where they're holding each other over the bow of the ship, or any other scene from Titanic, really, where it's been so kind of replicated that it doesn't have any punch anymore. But I still don't think that's, like, I don't think that's fair to the film, that it's been parodied so many times that, like, its moment has, like... So the only thing that I could think of was an entire film that I think is overrated. And it's particularly because of Rachel's suggestion of Ghost, which is... I've been watching a lot of Nora Ephron films recently. But years ago, I watched Sleepless in Seattle. And it's like... Sleepless in Seattle means romance film. It is like the name is just completely ubiquitous, but it's also considered like one of the best romance films of all time. And it's like, especially by Nora Ephron, who wrote When Harry Met Sally, and When Harry Met Sally is a great romance film about how like Hollywood's kind of bullshit. It's not love at first sight. It's not happily ever after. It's actually like long periods where relationships change and you grow in different directions and then you grow together. Whereas like to follow that up with something like Sleepless in Seattle, in which Meg Ryan is in a relationship, she's engaged to this guy, and they see the film takes care to show us that it's a good relationship. Like they make each other laugh, and then she hears Tom Hanks on the radio, becomes obsessed with him, hacks into his like private finance account so she can find out his address, travels halfway across the country, lays eyes on him, and then the film ends. And it's like such an unbelievable letdown where there's absolutely no connection or chemistry between the two main characters because they don't meet. And the point of the film seems to be like, leave your good relationship for your unhealthy fixation on someone you don't really know. And it's like, how is this considered the most romantic film of all time? Like, and I get it, because like, what's romantic about romance films often isn't that it's realistic or it's how relationships actually... But at the same time, I can't really like... follow along with the fantasy of like ditching someone who's actually really cute and good for you in exchange. Well, I suppose it is Tom Hanks and it is the 90s, but at the same time it's like you don't even get to be with him because the film ends before you do.
But then she doesn't have a very good relationship. I think Sleepless in Seattle is quite boring, but she doesn't have a very good relationship with the other guy, does she? I
just remember there being a scene where like at the beginning they're at this like engagement party or whatever where their families are there, and then they like run off and they're like laughing and they're kind of, it's all a bit stupid, and they don't seem to like actually care what their family thinks.
Yeah, maybe.
And it seems like they actually have quite a good connection. And then in the film, this is spoilers, but I hate it, so I'm going to spoil it. Like she dumps him and she's like, I'm leaving you. And I don't remember if she explains that it's because of this obsession that she has with Tom Hanks. But he's like very reasonable about it. He's like, you know, I kind of detected something was wrong. And it's like, did you? Because I didn't. Like, I don't know. I just wasn't very convinced by it.
I remember thinking she just had like such, and this is the thing that happens to Meg Ryan in Nora Ephron films, where she has very like sexless relationships with like her and what's his name in You've Got Mail. It's not, I keep wanting to say Kevin Kline. It's not Kevin Kline.
Tom Hanks?
No. Billy Crystal.
No.
Oh, no.
In You've Got Mail.
When You Get Mail.
Sorry, did I say When Harry Met Sally?
Yeah.
I meant You've Got Mail. That first relationship, Greg Kinnear.
Greg Kinnear.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, you two have never had sex in your lives. Like, no fucking way. And I think it's the same. What is the name of the guy that she's with in Sleepless in Seattle? But like that first boyfriend. And again, it's like, there's no sexual chemistry at all. So I think it makes sense that she runs away with Tom.
But there's less sexual chemistry between her and Tom Hanks.
That's also true. It's just generally not a great film. But
it's like considered great. So I think it's an entirely, I don't know, I think it's overrated by virtue of the fact that it just has the perfect name. Like Sleepless in Seattle is just the best name for a romance film that will ever be.
And also there's that like origin of like the Nora Ephron films, right? Like that's the first Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks film. And I think if You've Got Mail didn't exist, people wouldn't be as excited about Sleepless in Seattle. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think that's true.
Interesting. Clearly the Nora Ephron podcast needs to come.
Yeah, it does.
I saw all these films years ago. I can't remember any of
Have
it.
you not? Oh, I rewatch You've Got Mail every year.
Yeah, I actually did rewatch. I found it quite boring, so I stopped halfway through.
What? No, but they have mail.
Watch Lubitsch instead.
Yeah, no, that is true. Yeah, that's fair.
The film I was going to go for was Apocalypse Now. Which is
fair enough.
Which is a film I used to love, but I haven't watched it in a while, and maybe I'd listen because I was thinking about this scene with Robert Duvall, the I love the smell of napalm in the morning scene, and it's like I think when I was a kid I thought, oh, this is really cool, but thinking now I know a bit more about war and how evil that war was, and just America's kind of foreign policy in general. It seems less cool now. And just like, it's also just like I saw the, I don't know if you've seen Heart of Darkness, the documentary. It just looks really unsafe as well. Like Coppola was out of his mind on that film. That scene in particular was very dangerous. And also you're just blowing up parts of the Philippines just to make a film. It's like for one scene, you've blown up like a couple of acres of like rainforest. It seems like, what about the animals? Like it's like it seems disgusting actually. I think about it. So yeah, and it's like that. But that's the scene. That's a very kind of broy scene. It's like that line is obviously used a lot.
Have you read Heart of Darkness?
No, I haven't heard of the Conrad book.
Yeah. So like we had to read it and study it like so many times that I had to teach it. And it's a very similar. So like the main kind of critique, the post-colonial critique of Heart of Darkness is this idea that you're like critiquing colonialism in Africa, but the way that you're doing it is by acting like this is like this sort of dark no man's land of a place, and the people in it are kind of like faceless and voiceless and all of that kind of stuff. And so your critique is actually based on these like really racist ideas. And the way that like Conrad writes in that book about like maps in the banks based on maps, and it's like really fucked up. And I've always thought that Apocalypse Now carries that with it because it's an adaptation of that, obviously. And it's the same, he can't get out of that problem, right? Which is that he's critiquing American imperialism, but the way that he's doing it is by showing it as this like lawless place. The people that actually live there and that are the victims of this violence don't really get a narrative. And the way that he made that film also perpetuated a lot of that stuff.
Completely.
And it is like, baby, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. And it was like, we're just talking about Scorsese as well. That was the kind of like, the 70s, 80s. There was a lot of that kind of like essentially making like war films or gangster films that seem to be critiquing the thing, but actually you're glorifying it and making it look kind of really cool. And then people have like Travis Bickle on their wall, or they have Klutz or whoever. So like it's a kind of a film that I don't want to revisit, to be honest. I think it's probably not as worthwhile as I remember it. So
no.
And that scene in particular, like just the destruction is kind of like disgusting. And maybe like I appreciate the kind of technical power of that stunt, but like I'm kind of glad CGI exists now that we don't have to like blow up like monkeys and like insects, so we can have like a cool scene in a movie. Yeah. So sorry to end the show on such a downer.
Cancelling Francis Ford Coppola, the not as good Coppola.
But yeah, we should do this again. We actually get loads of questions. Thank you for everyone who sent in questions. They're all great. Apologies to people who haven't asked the question, but we will do it again. I think looking at the schedule, there's a lot of boring gaps coming up. So whenever there's no film out that we're interested in, we're going to come back to all your questions. So thank you for everyone who sent questions in. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Anahit. Thank you, Peter, for helping us set up and his question as well. We'll be back in 2 weeks. See you later. Bye.